It's pretty special when you come all the way over from West and you get one of our waste gurus in the West introduce me to the conference. So thanks, Jeff. And thank you all for coming and welcome. I want to start this conversation in our industry that no, qualifications are not a waste. Qualifications are an essential part of workforce development. We've just heard our previous speakers talk about education, and I just want to make a distinction between that. When we talk about education, we have formal education, I'll talk about it shortly, but it's really much more about behaviour change, awareness and knowledge and behaviour change. But what I talk about is the training that we need in our work, in our industry, to upskill our workforce. So qualifications, when we talk about it, we first off think of, most of us will think of university degrees, but what I'm going to talk about is our vet sector qualifications. So they're qualifications that are nationally accredited right across Australia for anyone that's in the workplace. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The sector focuses on the knowledge and skills required for productive capabilities and workforces. Qualifications can mean different indicators across occupations. For some, it may signal that an employee meets the requirement for a regulated occupation, such as an accountant, or they may be used to screen employees for employment. In the waste industry, usually it's experience that is used to screen for jobs. You know, how many years have you had in this? I want 2 years or I want 5 years experience, and it's not waste qualifications that are asked for. So, and as we'll see shortly, maybe the industry isn't aware that there are qualifications that exist and some financial support for you, or maybe they just don't see the value in it. And I just want to acknowledge this, our graduates, some of my graduates up here, that I'm very proud that they're all very proud to receive their certificates. So in the waste, each of you are at this conference to learn as much as you can, to learn a bit outside your field so you can go back and be productive in your work roles. As workers, you can cover as many roles as there are almost waste streams out there, and you're always striving to stay ahead of what your role is. As managers, you make the decisions on how we operate our waste facilities and operations, but you're also the decision makers when it comes to employing or requesting the skills and the knowledge that are required for your workforce. As industry representatives, you are the consultants, the advisors, the leaders supporting our waste industry, and you're providing that guidance when we come across local, national and international changes, as we heard this morning. And there are registered training organisations. These are the RTOs. Just like universities provide degrees, RTOs provide qualifications in the vet sector, so they're a really key player. Our industry is made up of many hard workers, and represented here by Shane. Shane's an experienced liquid waste operator, and if you asked Shane, he'd probably say he was pretty gun at it. Well before Shane was 27, he'd learned his skills on the job, gaining all the experience that made him a sought after. He was always the one that the managers would get to do the overtime because he was so good at what he was doing, and this is in the northwest of Western Australia. Shane had waste in his blood. Both his dad and his brother also worked in waste and for the same company. I first met Shane when his employer tapped in some skills traineeship funding, and with payroll tax exemptions available at the time in WA, Shane and many of his co-workers, leading hands and some supervisors were provided with training in a Certificate 3 in waste management at almost no cost to the employer. So I'll come back to that point and to Shane a little later. The vocational education training sector is a highly regulated industry and it's governed by federal and state departments, and they work with private and public training providers to achieve quality learning outcomes for our nation's workforce. Vocational education and training sits along school and university education. And in the vet sector, in this sector, the waste qualifications currently are a Certificate 2, 3, 4 and a diploma in waste management. The waste management qualifications were introduced into the vet sector in 2012, but since that time there's been very little or very poor take-up by the industry. As this chart shows, from 2014 to 2017 there's only been 319 completions of qualifications. Prior to 2014, it wasn't a requirement of RTOs to report their data. But there would have been a delay anyway from when it was started in 2012 to 2014. So, and also the 2018 data hasn't yet been validated. So if you look at it, the 319 is probably pretty close, because I know there are not too many RTOs across Australia, and we have a couple of them represented today, which I'll mention a bit later. Given that there are around, and we heard this morning, 50,000 people working in our industry, 319 to have completed a qualification that's very much waste specific is just extremely low and disappointing. And it's also impacting on the future of this type of training for our industry. For example, the Australian Industry Skills Committee has looked at all this data and said there's been no diplomas completed, so let's drop it. So that's going to now, so I'm challenging that. I'm saying that it's not to do that, because the industry isn't aware that there are qualifications out there. In the 2017 Industry Sector Report on Waste Collection, Treatment, Disposal Services, it states that nearly 50% of those employed in the industry have no qualifications. And of those with qualifications, around 30% have a Cert 3 or a Cert 4. Sounds great, but when you look at that most of those are from other trades and industries and not from our own industry. For years I've monitored waste advertisements for jobs. It was actually one of the tasks when I first joined the waste industry many years ago, and I just kept doing it. I got a bit hooked on it. So I have alerts all set up that's right across Australia that send me job adverts, and I'm monitoring them really closely. In all these job adverts, as you can see on the screen, it's experience that is sought. Not one of them is asking for any waste qualifications. In that time, I've seen one that came up, and it was for a worker with the responsibility for managing waste in a chocolate factory. And that was only after their head office in Europe had given them the directive that they had to have zero waste to landfill by 2022. So the company then, obviously they're not involved in waste, that's not their core product, but recognised that they need someone in that role with a waste qualification. Qualifications are sought in waste-based roles, and in this advert here for a waste education officer in a suburb of Perth, they do ask for qualifications, which is great, but it's qualifications in environmental science or education that is considered for this role and not for our own industry. So let's contrast this with another industry. In the traffic industry, if you want to apply for a job as a traffic controller, you must have, and they're a really important role. They keep all of us in the community safe. But you must have 2 units of competency to even apply for that job. And that's national. These adverts are, I think, are over here on the East Coast, but it's the same in WA as well. Yet in our industry, you don't need any competencies or qualifications to actually work in our industry. I do acknowledge that you do need carrier licences to transport controlled or prescribed or regulated waste. However, there is no units of competency attached to that licence. Jobs in our industries come and go. The labour markets don't stand still. It's the same in our industry. Jobs and work practices of the past are different to what we're doing today and may not even exist in the future. The classic example in our industry is in the picture up here, which is gorgeous. The worker, that we all affectionately know as the garbo, used to run behind the trucks and empty the bins, so manual and physical skills were required. Now, household waste is collected in those amazing trucks that are out there that we all saw last night when we were having our drinks. And you need intellectual and technology skills with high levels of literacy and numeracy to operate those vehicles. It's not just jobs that are changing, but services and operations in our industry will change too. And we saw that in the last 18 months with the impact of the China sword. Some of our industries had to change and change really quickly to be able, and that impacted on the jobs and the skills that our workforce needed. The gaps between training and the job requirements of our industry do need closing. If you think back to these qualifications were introduced in 2012, how different is our operations now? How different is it in the last 18 months? So these qualifications do need to be reviewed, and that's happening now. So we're looking at how to better support the industry, to look at waste as a resource rather than as a waste, as we heard this morning, and also to move more towards a circular economy. There'll be opportunities for skill sets. At the moment, it's all focused on the degree. So it's like if you do qualification, if you do a Cert 3, waste management, 17 units. So that's going to change. There'll be some skill sets, might only be 2 or 4 units you can do, and your employees can then build up towards a qualification. They'll be encouraging new entrants into the industry. We're going to be working with high school students for that, to give them a taste of what the industry might be, and providing pathways to leadership for long-term careers. As representatives in the industry, it's really important that you do have a say in this, and all of these documents will be sent out to the industry for review and comment. So if you'd like to be involved in that, please message me through the app or come and see me afterwards, and I'll make sure you get invited or included on that process. The industry sector report I referred to earlier identified the need for wider learning culture in our industry, a recognition of those developing career pathways through qualifications, and for improved funding initiatives at the traineeship level. Workforce development needs to incorporate a range of learning strategies so that we look at the work that we do as not just jobs, but as careers. Providing training and job tasks is great because it increases the knowledge spool or pool of workers in that industry, but you're not giving them the broader scope of what our industry needs, and particularly when we're challenged, like we did last year in the National Sword. It's reported in the 2016 paper Connecting Productivity that Australia's workforce needs to be a source of competitive strength, and the trend is towards an economy needing higher levels of workforce skill. So let's look at how you can get some money for this. Training for waste management qualifications can be undertaken either through a fee for service in an arrangement with an RTO or via a traineeship. There are federal government incentives for new and existing workers to gain qualifications through traineeships. And in New South Wales, one of our RTOs here, Academy Green, has funding under the Smart and Skilled programs for traineeships in waste. But that's not right across Australia. Unfortunately, waste was on the National Skills List, but it has been dropped from that. Again, it's just not because of the qualifications not being picked up. So this first chart will show that if waste was on the National Skills List and you had an employee commence and complete the certificate or traineeship, then you're entitled to $4,000 of funding. Because waste is not, we can still do it in the second chart that you can see up there, but it's only for new employees, and it's only offered when they must be signed up within the first 3 months of them gaining employment. So our highly experienced workforce is ageing and is currently 5 years older than the national average. So our industry does need to be showcased as an attractive and long-term career choice so that new and hopefully younger employees are attracted to our industry. And offering training is one pathway that we can do that. If you're on LinkedIn, you're going to see these pop up every now and again, where the Chief Financial Officer asks his Chief Executive Officer, what happens if we invest in developing our people and they leave us? And the wise CEO says, what happens if we don't and they stay? And this one, my favourite, from Richard Branson, train people well enough so they can leave, treat them well enough so they don't want to leave. This happened to one of my graduates. She's passionate about waste, had considerable experience working in waste, but couldn't gain approval from her employer for training directly related to her job. So she covered the cost of obtaining the waste management qualification herself, and in holiday time, because she couldn't even get work time off. So the good news is that the qualification helped her gain her dream job in waste management. But as you guessed it, we have another employer. So what can we do? First call of action is for the RTOs. When an industry the size of the waste industry, you're talking 50,000 people that are employed, gets on board with training, huge opportunities for RTOs will be created. To kickstart this, RTOs need to be investing in and working closely with our industry. And I'm really excited that we've got 2 RTOs represented here today in this talk. So we have Academy Green and also Optech. I think that's probably a first, because I go to several conferences, and it's the first I've known of RTOs to be at a conference. So well done, guys. Thank you. The next one is in our industry representatives. You can strive for training to be placed on the agendas and in your engagements in boardrooms and at state and federal governments, and continue to strive for skills in our industry to be recognised, argue for increases in financial incentives, and keep talking about the benefits of training to the industry and communicate this at the highest levels that you have access to. For managers, training contributes to consistent best practice, a safer workforce, well-functioning and productive work groups, and as research has shown, a more reliable and less mobile workforce. Financial incentives are available, so tap into what you can, talk to the RTOs, and they'll be able to help you get some financial assistance. And I challenge you as managers to make a start when you're putting advertisements out for positions. Start asking for waste management qualifications are desirable, and in no time at all start asking for waste management qualifications are essential. I believe that small step will make a huge difference in our industry where what qualifications are going to be recognised. For workers, talk to your supervisors and managers about waste management training and get it added to your professional development. Investing your time in nationally recognised training will increase job satisfaction, provide you with greater economic security, and if you need it, maybe mobility. And best of all, you will gain a qualification to support the specialised experience, knowledge, and skills that you contribute to our industry. I now want to bring you back to Shane. Shane worked hard over 12 months and completed his training, as along with his work colleagues. As I was congratulating Shane, I said to him, you can now add this qualification to your resume. He said, no, I can't do that. Shane's response really shocked me. Shane said, I need to dumb down my resume to work in waste. I believe our industry does need, I believe our industry's current and future workers need to be recognised for your highly specialised experience, your knowledge and skills, and the qualifications that you gain in waste management. Now more than ever, and we heard this morning, our industry needs to be valued for the essential services that we are providing and to be regarded as a professional career, and that we're all not just garbos. I hate it when any of my students say to me, oh, I'm just a garbo, but no, you're a waste manager, you're a waste manager. So we need to change those words and so that we are valued. And we want to encourage passionate people like all of you to come along to this conference, to come on the journey with us. So I want to end this where I started, with a conversation that begins with, qualifications are an essential part of workforce development. Please contact me if you want to talk a lot more about it. I can talk a lot about it. So thank you.